Good day, class 11. We move on to the subtopic, the authority of a constitution. Earlier, we have read about some of the functions a constitution performs. Those functions emphasize the fact why most societies have a constitution. People are inquisitive, and therefore a number of questions arise. Some of them are: what is a constitution? How effective is a constitution? Is a constitution just? Well, let's try to answer these questions. A constitution is a compact document that comprises a number of articles about the state, specifying how the state is to be constituted and what norms it should follow. Let us take the Constitution of the United Kingdom. It is the shortest constitution in the world. It is a series of documents that came to be called the Constitution. Most of the practices, customs and traditions have come down from generation to generation and are practiced even today. Many have also been reformed. That means changes have taken place. Therefore, it can be said that a constitution is a set of documents that seeks to perform the functions that is mentioned above. It has been observed that many constitutions in the world exist only on paper. That is, more words are written on paper, but not put into practice. So, how effective is a constitution? What makes it effective? This depends on many factors. The first, mode of promulgation. Here, another question arises. See how curious and how inquisitive human beings are. Doubts have to be cleared. And it says here, how does a constitution come into being? In many countries, constitutions remain defunct. Defunct means not in use, non-existent. Why? Because they were framed by military leaders or unpopular leaders who did not have the ability to carry the people with them. Meaning, or in other words, didn't give people their natural rights, nor protect them. Most successful constitutions are India, South Africa, and the USA. These were created after popular national movements. The Indian Constitution was drafted by a Constituent Assembly between December 1946 and November 1949. After the nationalist movements, the Indian Constitution had the ability to take along different sections of people together. It has a great legitimacy from the fact that it was drawn up by people who enjoyed immense public credibility. This group had the capacity to negotiate and command the respect of a wide cross-section of society. They were able to convince the people that a constitution was not an instrument for the imposition of their personal powers. Some countries have subjected their constitution to a referendum where people vote on the desirability of a constitution. That is, the people must agree if the principles of the constitution are desirable or not. But the Indian Constitution has never had such a referendum. It carried enormous public authority as it had the consensus and backing of leaders who were very popular. The people adopted the Constitution as their own by abiding by its provisions. This is now clear that the authority of the people who enact the Constitution help determine its prospects for success. Next, the substantive provisions of a constitution. A constitution with its substantive provisions results in an exceptional constitution that it gives everyone in society some reason to go along with its provisions. On the other hand, a constitution that allows permanent majorities to oppress minorities within society would give minorities no reason to go along with the provisions of the Constitution. Again, let's take the example of Sri Lanka. The government followed a majoritarian policy. The policies were in favor of the majority Sinhala-speaking people. What had happened to the Sri Lankan Tamils, the Indian Tamils? They were left out. They began to feel alienated. That is, the government did not care about their language, nor religion, nor their political rights, nor give them equal opportunities. What was the result? I have already told you earlier. If any group feels that identity is being stifled, choked, they are not given those rights where they can identify themselves as belonging to a particular country, they will have no reason to abide by the Constitution. No constitution achieves perfect justice. In fact, it has to convince people that it provides the framework for pursuing basic justice. Therefore, it can be concluded that more a constitution preserves the freedom and equality of all its members, the more likely it is to succeed. Next, balanced institutional design. In many countries, constitutions are often subverted, which means constitutions are misused by small groups who wish to enhance their own power. Well-framed constitutions distribute power in society and in such a way that no single group can subvert the Constitution. So, why should a constitution be well designed? This is to ensure that no single constitution acquires monopoly of power. This is often done by sharing power across different institutions. You have read about the sharing of power between the different organs of government and the different levels of government. Therefore, India or the Indian Constitution is the best example. Power is shared by the legislature, the executive, and judiciary, as well as the election commission. Now, this ensures that no institution can misuse the Constitution. And you know why? This also you have read. Because other institutions can check the misuse of powers. Therefore, this system of checks and balances has made the Indian Constitution successful. Second, the important aspect of a well-framed and drafted constitution is that it must have the right balance between certain values, norms, and procedures as authoritative. At the same time, it allows enough of flexibility in its operations to adapt to changing needs and circumstances. Too rigid a constitution Rigid here means certain or most ideals or principles that are mentioned in the Constitution cannot, will not be changed. They remain stagnant. Right? So, too rigid a constitution, which means a constitution in which no changes can be made, is likely to collapse under the weight of change. If a constitution is too flexible, that means these ideals and principles can be changed very easily, what will the end result be? There will be no security or identity to the people. Therefore, for a constitution to be successful, the right balance should be struck between preserving core values and adopting them to new circumstances. The Indian Constitution is described as a living document. Why? It maintains a balance between the possibility to change the provisions and the limits on such changes. This arrangement also ensures that no section or group can, on its own, subvert the Constitution. The Constitution is the locus of people's hopes and aspirations. Next point is, how was the Indian Constitution made? It was not child's play. It took 166 days over a period of 2 years, 11 months to draft the Constitution. There were long drawn debates and discussions. And finally, our Constitution was drafted. The Constitution was made by the Constituent Assembly, which had been elected for undivided India. The members were elected by indirect election by the members of the provisional legislative assemblies that had been established in 1935. Now, as I told you, we are always inquisitive and curious to know more and more and more. So, what was the composition? Each province and princely state, or a group of states, were allotted seats proportional to their respective population, like the ratio being 1:1 lakh. Hence, provinces elected a minimum of 292 members, while the princely states elected a minimum of 93 states. The seats in each province were distributed among the three main communities: Muslims, Sikhs, and the general, in proportion to their respective populations. Members of each community in the provisional government or in the provisional legislative assembly elected their own representatives by the method of proportional representation with single transferable vote. A single transferable vote. That means the votes could be transferred. The method of selection in the case of representatives of princely states was to be determined by consultation. Composition of the Constituent Assembly. The partition of India in 1947 resulted in the reduction of members in the Constituent Assembly. As some members who were elected were from regions that came under Pakistan after the partition. The elected members from these regions were not members of the Constituent Assembly. Therefore, the members dropped to 299. On 26th November 1949, there were 284 members actually present who signed the Constitution as finally passed. The Constitution was framed amid terrible violence. This violence erupted due to the partition. It is a tribute to the hard work and determination of the framers that they not only drafted a constitution under great pressure, but also learned the right lessons from this violence that accompanied the partition. The question always arises as to why we should accept the Constitution framed by the members of the Constituent Assembly. The members of the Assembly were not elected by universal suffrage, but there was a serious attempt to make the Assembly a representative body. Members of all religions were given representation. The Assembly also had 26 members from the scheduled classes. It is often said that the Indian National Congress dominated the Assembly. They had 82% of the seats in the Assembly. So their will, their ideas may have been forced on the other members of the Constituent Assembly. Students, this is a wrong concept. Why? You see, the Congress itself was such a diverse party that it managed to accommodate almost all types of opinion within it. The principle of deliberation. Where did the authority of the Constitution come from? It came from the fact that the assembly was broadly representative. It also comes from the procedures it adopted to frame the Constitution and the values its members brought to their discussions. It is desirable that different sections of society participate. Each member deliberated upon the Constitution with the interests of the whole nation in mind. There were discussions made by a few for self-interest, but they were negligible. There were legitimate differences of principles. These differences were like the adoption of a centralized or decentralized system of government, the relations between states and center, the power of the judiciary, protection of property rights by the Constitution. Almost all issues of a modern state were discussed. The only issue that was passed without much debate was the introduction of universal suffrage, meaning all citizens reaching a certain age would be entitled to be voters, regardless of religion, caste, education, gender, or income. Not like the constitutions of 1791 in France, where the men of property and wealth were considered as active citizens and had the right to vote. What about the women? What about the peasants, craftsmen, workers? They had no right to vote. But India, as a modern state, gave its citizens, all its citizens, above the age of 18, let's be more precise, the right to vote, no matter whether they were rich, poor, educated, or illiterate, whether high caste or low caste. They all had the right to vote. All other matters were thoroughly discussed and debated. The Constitution drew its authority from the members of the Constituent Assembly that was engaged in public reason. The Assembly placed great emphasis on discussion and reasoned arguments. The Constitution was made a transparent document where, what is a transparent document? Right? A transparent document is a document where each clause was subjected to scrutiny and debate. That is transparency, where everyone in the Constituent Assembly had a chance to scrutinize and debate on certain important ideals or principles. These debates were so lengthy and detailed that these should be remembered as one of the most significant chapters in the history of constitution making. How far my mind goes, I think there were around 2,000 amendments that were made. And all those discussions and debates were all recorded. The media was allowed to attend these discussions and debates. So you can see how transparent our framers wanted to make these ideals and principles of the Constitution. So, really, many people say, like, the drafting of the Indian Constitution was slow-paced, can be compared to the movement of a snail. But the real fact is, every ideal, every principle was discussed. Students, go through this video. Remember my instructions that I had given you in the first video. If you like it, you can press the like button. You can subscribe and press the icon bell. This will inspire me to make better videos so that you can understand